Episode number 8 of the Paranormal Planes podcast. Ghosts, UFOs, cryptids, anything you want to talk about. Share your story with me. You can either send it to the messages and Paranormal Planes podcast page there on Facebook, or put it directly on the wall and we'll get it up on the next podcast. I'd like to thank everybody that's been tuning in to the different episodes, and hopefully you're enjoying it. If you are, just do me a favor and tell your friends, or take our page and share it on your page to all your friends so we can get more members and more stories to get out on these episodes. I'd like to say sorry that I haven't been getting these out every week, but had some crazy life events going on. So please bear with me, and one of these days maybe I'll be up to par and getting them out on a weekly basis. Tonight we're going to start the stories off with a Minnesota story from Zephyrin. This story happened when I was a teenager, to my mother, not me, but I was there to see how it affected her. My mother, who was becoming Catholic at the time, saved up her money and flew to Minnesota to attend a Catholic conference. It was autumn, and the leaves in Minnesota were changing beautifully. So, on her first day there, she decided to take a little nature walk. The hotel concierge told her about a nearby wilderness preserve that had walking paths, and instructed her how to get to it. My mom was a pretty fearless person, even when she is in an unfamiliar place. And since there were plenty of other people there enjoying the park, she wasn't worried about walking into the woods alone. She was having a pleasant walk, but it was getting dark, and she decided to head back towards her car. As she walked back, she noticed the forest suddenly became strangely silent, and she had an intense feeling of someone watching her, threateningly. It was like she was being hunted. Feeling uneasy, she started to pray. Then, something she could not see began breathing heavily in her right ear. She said it sounded like a giant beast that had been running hard and was panting. She could also hear heavy footsteps crushing through the grass and dried leaves next to her on the same side. In fact, she could even see the grass being parted there. When she increased her speed, the unseen creature did as well. The people she had seen in the park earlier had gone home by then, and reaching her car seemed to take forever. Mom got ready for bed, feeling quite shaken and tired when she returned to her hotel room. The next day was Sunday, so she set her alarm to wake up in the morning to go to Mass. It went off at the proper time, but as she sleepily reached out to quiet it, she noticed there was a second alarm clock in the room, one she had not seen before. This alarm clock had a different time, and according to it, she didn't need to get up for another hour. So for some reason, she chose to trust it and went back to sleep. When she finally woke up, there was no sign of the mysterious second alarm clock, and she had missed Mass. My mom returned from Minnesota more determined than before to live as a Catholic, yet she seemed strangely altered. Her mood was troubled and solitary. I remember her spending a great deal of time sitting in her chair by the window, praying rosaries with a pained expression in her eyes. When I would ask her what was wrong, she wouldn't tell me. Finally, after about a month of this, she confided in me that ever since her experience in Minnesota, she had been unable to pray properly. Her prayers had become jumbled with obscene messages and vulgar thoughts. It was disgusting and made her ashamed to attempt to pray. It was explained to her by a priest that the demon from the forest had followed her home. It was assaulting her with these visions in order to stop her from praying so that she would give up being a Catholic. The answer was to fight through the sickening imagery and even pray more. So that's why she had been spending so much time in prayer. And eventually it worked. The demon went away. Thank you for that story, and I think she has it absolutely right. It's the good versus the bad, and the bad was trying to keep her away from praying and being on the good side. So I don't know what all you guys think about religion, but I've got my own thoughts, and I don't know, it just seems to boil down to, like, no matter what religion you are in, there's always the good and the bad, and they just call the gods and the demons different names, so I don't know. My personal opinion is it's all just good or evil, no matter what name you call it by. And there's extremists, and there's, I don't know, just regular people that are out there trying to worship and be spiritual on their own terms. So, I don't know. That's that one. And now we got a story coming in from Arkansas from AMJ. I was only 7 and I slept by myself. My room was located at the end of the hall on the left, right in front of my parents' room. It all happened in the year 2011, in May, right after the tornado in Joplin had hit. My dad was occasionally going to Joplin because of his job to help reconstruct. It was late and raining a little bit. I could hear the raindrops hit my window. It was keeping me up. Then became the moment when I started to fall asleep to the rhythm of the raindrops. Suddenly, I began to hear footsteps in the hallway. They were huge footsteps, and they were loud. They sounded like my dad's work boots. But something was wrong. Something was very wrong. How could I hear footsteps in the hallway if there was only carpet? When I realized this, I became terrified and felt a rush of unexplained desperation. My only thought then was crying for my parents to come in. And that's exactly what I did. I cried and tried to scream, but I couldn't scream. Something was keeping me from doing it. So I ran to the door and leaned against and covered my ears and kept crying. Only this time, there was force on the other side of the door. They, or it, was trying to get in. But I kept pulling my weight on the door, holding it shut. I looked up to the doorknob, and it was shaking. Not just a little shake, it was a shake that continued for a long time, and the knob moved very rapidly. I had never been so scared in my life. Suddenly, it all stopped, and I felt like I could breathe again. I didn't feel scared anymore. I relaxed and finally screamed for Dad to come to my room. When I was sure it was him, I opened the door for him. I told him everything that happened, and he waited for me to fall asleep. But no way was I going to sleep after that. So I just pretended to be sleeping. He was convinced. He went to the kitchen and came back with an egg and a glass of water. He said a prayer with the egg passing it above my body. Huh, that's definitely something I've never heard of, is the egg being passed above the body while saying a prayer. Something learned here, maybe? Or actually something I need to check more into, because I don't know what religion that would be and what the significance of the egg would be. Oh, egg in a glass of water. I don't know. Something to check into. Something for all you guys to check into. That's something very interesting. Alright, the next story comes to us from South Dakota, and not making up this name, that's what they put there, corpse guts. Interesting. I don't know, this is a maybe Bigfoot story or just some kind of entity, but it's titled The Thing by the River. I never really believed in ghosts or anything supernatural before. I had this experience with my friends. I have a lot of stories of that my friends would consider supernatural. This exact story still scares me to this day. Even though it happened months ago, I still think about it all the time. The fact that we never found out what the thing really was bothered me. Over the summer, me, my mom, and a couple friends of mine all went to Sturgis, South Dakota, because my mom took an assignment there. She's a traveling nurse. We originally lived in Kansas. We stayed there the entire summer and a little bit of the school year. My mom rented a house with her roommate, while me and my 3 friends all lived in a house down the street from my mom's. We were too loud and stayed up all night, so they rented out our own separate house for us. How cool is that? A few months passed, and things were pretty good in South Dakota. The people were all nice, the nature is breathtaking, and there were nothing but positive vibes. That all took a very dramatic turn one day when my mom and Michelle were eating lunch at the Knuckle Saloon, a world-famous bar and grill located in Sturgis. My friends and I decided to drive 30 minutes to Rapid City to go shopping since we had just gotten our allowances from our parents, and one of my friends is old enough to drive. So we drive to Rapid City and go shopping for a few hours until she decided she was bored and wants to go exploring, since that was only our second time in Rapid City. We leave the mall and drive around for an hour or so until we find a beautiful waterfall hidden behind a bunch of trees and huge boulders. So she parks the car, and we all get out to take pictures of the waterfall. We ended up staying there for more than 15 minutes because we ended up hiking around the waterfall to take more pictures. One of my friends decided that she wants to explore on her own and take her own photos for her Instagram, so she wanders off and we don't think anything of it. My other friend, the one who drove us to the location, and I are still taking pictures with our cameras and are on Snapchat bragging to everybody about our view, when all of a sudden we hear a blood-curdling scream coming from the opposite end of the waterfall. We kind of look at each other, completely shook and unsure of what to do. So we run towards the direction of the scream, and we see our friend in the river, confused as how she got there. So we run down the hill to see what was wrong with her, and she didn't say a single word. She just pointed towards a bunch of trees. So we both look in the direction she's pointing and see a black figure. I couldn't make out what it was, but they swear up and down it wasn't human or alive. It had the body of a little girl, but we couldn't see the face. It was completely black. As soon as I saw the figure, I ran down the hill to help them up and over the railing, and we all ran to the car and drove off. Later that night, I decided to ask her what happened and how she managed to fall over the railing, down the hill, and into the river. She told me that she was leaning over the railing to get photos of the river when all of a sudden she feels someone tap her on the back. She thought it was me or our other friend and wasn't thinking much of it, so proceeds to take pictures of the river when all of a sudden she felt someone forcefully push her over the railing. She went tumbling down the hill into the river. Thank God it was still, or she would have drowned or gotten swept away. She says that she looked up to see what had pushed her, and it was the figure of a little girl. She couldn't see the face or anything because it was completely black. So she stands up and starts screaming at the little girl, which I couldn't hear because we were on the other side of the waterfall. These were her exact words. I stood up to ask the thing that pushed me why it did, and when all of a sudden it comes flying at my face, literally flying. I fell back down and started weeping and crying for you guys. I don't know what the thing was, but I definitely know it wasn't human. I brushed it off thinking it was a bunch of nonsense, and that she was only trying to scare me. Until the next day, when we drive past the waterfall with my mom to go see Mount Rushmore, and my mom pulls up a news article about a little girl who drowned in the river a year ago. I get shivers up and down my back, and I immediately get goosebumps. She was telling the truth all along. What did we see? Was it the little girl, or was it just our nerves playing tricks on us? I'll never know what it was, but I have some pretty good ideas as to what it could have been. Would any of you have any ideas as to what it was we saw and attacked my friend? I keep thinking it's the little girl that drowned in the same river, but I have a feeling it isn't. Why would she try to attack my friend? I don't know. Someone help me get closure on this. I don't know there. I don't see a little girl being evil enough to push another girl over the railing to try to drown her. Most of the time when you hear of stories of little kids drowning or little kids dying, suddenly they're searching and confused as to what's going on, not knowing that they died or whatever, can't move on. But anything that would push a person over a railing like that, Definitely something that's more angry, more evil, and definitely not a little kid. It just takes on the form of the little kid. That's my personal opinion. I don't know. You guys can give your thoughts on it. Go to the page there and just say, in regards to the story of, give the person your thoughts. Let them know what you think it might have been. But I personally think it was just one of the spirits of the hills, because, there's tons of them out there, whether it be the cowboys or the natives that are out there still, settlers, pioneers. There's lots going on in the hills. You can just feel it when you're out there. Those hills are alive. I think that's why we love them so much. Okay, the next story is going to be read by Angela.
Alright, this story comes to us from Colorado, and it was posted by Fiend Without a Face. This is my first ghost experience that I had earlier in the summer of this year. Here's a bit of information to give you some understanding. After my grandma died in 2012, my uncle had started to have strange occurrences happen around his house. One of which was a toy that would go off and on by itself. In case you were wondering, it's a Mr. Hanky talking bobblehead from South Park. I know it sounds completely stupid, but something kept making it talk and drain the battery. He had never had problems with this thing before, and he had the same batteries in it for a few years, and he never had to replace them until now. So here's the part where it's going to start getting weird. My dad went out of state for a reunion with his band, and the reunion happened to be in the area where my uncle lived. So my dad crashed with him for the whole time. My dad and uncle look really similar. This is important for a theory I have later. When my dad came back home, I welcomed him back, and the usual things you would do when a loved one has been gone for a while. After we finished talking, I went back to my room to write. A few minutes into my hobby, the lights started flickering like mad. Now, I live in an old house, so this wasn't uncommon, but when it wouldn't stop, I got fed up and took a picture. What showed up seemed to be some sort of blob-like thing. It was partly transparent and had a blue hue to it. I know that sometimes there are anomalies that happen to be caught on camera. I don't know for sure that this is in fact an anomaly or not. After I took it, I started screaming, "Ghost!" Of course, my parents were concerned as to what I was screaming about. I showed them the picture. My dad just brushed it off, but my mom showed a subtle interest towards it. After that, I didn't want to sleep in my room. In fact, I wanted to move into the basement. Sadly, my parents would have none of it, so I shamefully went back to my room and started talking to try to reason with the ghost or whatever had caused me to panic. Afterwards, I felt calm and felt as if I had gained a friend. A few weeks later, weird things started happening, not only to me, but with my parents. The first thing that happened was to me. I burned incense on a daily basis. I had a stick ready in the holder to burn. At the last second, I decided to wait till later to light it for some reason. I walked downstairs to talk to my mom, and went back up a little later to see that the holder and incense were gone. I looked on the floor, seeing that it was right side up, with a stick placed in the bed of the holder, and ash scattered everywhere. I called my mom upstairs, thinking that she knocked it over by accident, since I usually put the holder right by my bed, and she usually makes my bed as well. I didn't even think about how my bed was still unmade, so she had no reason to be near the desk where I put the incense. Ironically, she said she hadn't touched a thing, and went back downstairs. I automatically knew afterwards who the culprit was, and it was definitely not my dad, because he barely comes in my room. I cleaned up the ashes and started cursing at the ghost as if I knew that it was in the room. I forgot about the incident that happened with me. My mom had two things that happened to her, one of which had to do with her planter. My mom had gotten up one day, Dad was at work, and I was in my room. Suddenly I heard her cursing. I went to see if she was all right, and she told me to look at the floor. There was a broken flower pot and leaves and dirt everywhere. I honestly had no idea what to think about it, while Mom called my dad, yelling at him, thinking he knocked it over and didn't tell her. He insisted that he didn't. She then turned to me, but quickly realized I never open the curtains in the morning, which is where the planter was. That's why she assumed my dad, because he always does that. The next thing that happened when I was in bed and my mom was still awake. She started to hear this strange noise. When she found the source, it was coming from the Blu-ray player. It was on and vibrating almost as if someone was shaking it. Now here's the thing. We hadn't used it in forever, which gave it no explainable reason for it to be on. The last strange thing happened to my dad. He usually sits downstairs and watches TV. He felt the urge to go to the garage to get something. There's a door that leads into the garage downstairs, so he went to open it. But he couldn't because the doorknob was on the floor. He was pretty mad because he knew he'd have to be the one to fix it. But for an odd reason, he brushed it off entirely, even though something like that has never happened before. A month later, my uncle came to stay at our house for a while because he was on a vacation, and we all thought it would be more convenient rather than paying to stay at a hotel. For me, my uncle is my idol when it comes to ghosts. We even sit around and make fun of ghosts' adventures. I showed him the picture that I took earlier. Note, I'm sorry that I can't link you to the picture because I'm writing this on mobile and it's on another device. Also, if you were wondering why I took the picture in the first place, it's because I was told that you're most likely to get a picture of a ghost when something strange like that happens. He seemed to be intrigued by it since he had gotten similar pictures before. Also, sometimes when I get bored, I take pictures of my room to see if I can get anything. Right when the flash goes off, I see orbs going through the viewfinder, but when I look at the actual picture, there's nothing there. My uncle has dubbed these as fast ghosts, ones that show up on camera but are not in the actual picture. We both aren't sure if fast ghosts are a type of anomaly or not. The funny thing is that while he was here, the activity started to mellow out, and when he left, it was gone completely. Finally, here's my theory. Since my uncle seems to have a lot of ghosts, I believe some of them are able to follow him around. Since my dad and uncle look so similar, the ghost might have gotten confused and thought my uncle was my dad and followed him home. Then realized the mistake, and when my uncle came, it went back home with him. So I believe that my haunting is linked to my uncle's house. One question I get a lot of times when telling this to my friends is, do you think the ghost is your grandma? The answer is no, and here's why. First, my grandma wasn't a mischievous woman, unlike the ghost. Plus, we had a nickname for the ghost as well. Due to its behavior, I believe it was a boy. So our name for him was Mr. Ghost. Plus, it gave me no sign to say that it was female. Thank you so much for sticking this far in. I have a question for commenters as well. Has anyone changed their view about the afterlife because of their paranormal experience? Because this changed my whole view on death and God completely.
Thank you for that story, Angela. And now we have a special treat for you guys tonight. Daniel Boone, our youngest, is going to read you a scary ghost story. Welcome, Daniel.
The next story is from Denise in Nebraska. A couple years back, I had sat down with my family at our new house. Someone had brought up the old house we had just moved from being haunted, which I, of course, knew and told everyone, but no one would admit to believe me in hopes I would not go live with my dad. I should really have known they knew, seeing that as they used to light sage and throw holy water in the doorways. But they told me it was just to make me feel better about the house. My mom started the conversation. She had spoke of why we really blocked off a living room that had been connected to my bedroom of the time. My family made me sleep in the basement in the winter and upstairs in the summer. She had told me about furniture moving in there and objects being thrown. Even my stepdad being thrown against a wall. He is a very big guy, which of course scared the crap out of me, seeing as I and my friends used to crawl through the window and play back there. She then went on to discuss that she was there were two ghosts, one who moved things and at first was very nice and one who was very evil. I also experienced both of these ghosts and was, at one point, what we all believed to be possessed. One day I was at my house alone, sitting in my basement playing games. I have no clue why, seeing as the basement scared me, all my animals were downstairs with me when the tornado sirens went off. The dogs started howling, but didn't move from where they were. As I made my way up the stairs, I heard heavy footsteps going toward the door. So I ran upstairs to see my stepdad, but no one was home. I grabbed my dogs and sat at the park until my parents got home. The sirens had shut off. Another time, I was sitting in my basement watching a horror movie with a friend when my door slammed shut. I would blame this on the wind, but there was no windows in my basement. It was winter, and my door simply does not shut. You can slam it as hard as you want, but the house has settled to where the frame doesn't allow the door to shut. My stepdad also had an experience like this when he and my mom were staying in the basement. When my mom slept on the left of the bed, she would have horrifying nightmares of being dragged out of the bed, levitated off the bed, and even being choked. Ironically, I, for some reason, always refused to sleep on that side of the bed, but did not know at this time. My stepdad began sleeping on that side of the bed and having the same nightmares. At one point, he got so mad, he placed crosses on the walls and yelled, "Get in now." Unfortunately, as soon as he exited the room, my door again slammed shut somehow. All of the pictures of me and my sister as kids fell and shattered, and all the crosses fell off the wall. Shortly after this, my sister moved back in with her 1-year-old Ember. She was a terrible mother, which is harsh to say, but the only way to explain the situation. Ember slept with my parents downstairs in her crib. One night, my mom woke up to Ember laughing at something. She had to wipe her eyes a few times because it looked like Ember was not only standing, which she did not know how to do at the time, but floating a half-foot from the bottom of the crib. Suddenly, Ember's face turned to absolute horror as she began screaming, and was what looked like dropped. My mom jumped out of the bed and grabbed her. From then on, they began sleeping in the upstairs sun room, where the dogs always ran to when something happened. We had another ghost that would play tricks on us and never really seemed to be mean to us. Every morning, my stepdad would set his coffee cup down and turn around and find it was gone. It would show up shortly before he had to go to work. One morning, he woke up in an extremely bad mood as my mother was petrified of the house. This entity had moved the cup just like every morning, but this time my stepdad yelled at the ghost saying this was not effing funny. He went outside to smoke a cigarette and came back in, and it was back where he left it. Things like this happened all the time, but never bothered us. When I had the room upstairs, I used to always see my closet doors move. They were sliding glass mirrors, which made it worse. One day, I had just got out of the shower and opened up my cupboard to get my toothbrush. My mother's expensive perfume that had just been missing fell out of the cupboard, shattering on the countertop, and impaled my leg with multiple small shards of glass. My mother blamed me and I blamed my sister, who swore it wasn't her. I think this was the scariest thing that had ever happened at the house. So terrifying, it drove us to move out as quickly as possible. One night, while sleeping in my room upstairs, my TV mysteriously shut off. At this point, my parents were forcing my sister to sleep with me in my room to keep me safe, though I hadn't known this at the time. I woke my sister up and told her. She said the power probably went out and went downstairs. She came back a few minutes later and turned the TV on. I always slept on the edge of my bed so I couldn't see myself in the closet mirrors as they scared me. But on this specific night, I had fallen asleep towards the middle, close to my sister. But I'm not sure when I woke up, but it was late. I remember looking at myself in the mirror for what seems like forever, then getting out of bed, walking to my sister's side of the bed, biting her on the arm, and then walking back to the other side of my bed. My sister says she screamed bloody murder, and I can't remember her even moving. Apparently, my mom and stepdad came running up the stairs, flipping on the lights, and went to my sister's side. She told me what I did, and they tried to wake me up to punish me, but apparently they couldn't get me up. I thought this was a dream for the longest time because they never spoke of it. Now, looking back, my sister wore long sleeves for the next week even though it was summer. We moved out 2 weeks later. I truthfully do believe that the house is haunted and would never return there in my life. I never found out what happened in the house to make these things appear and haunt us, and truthfully, I don't want to. I refuse to drive by that house when I am in Air Park. I will take the long way to get to family members' houses.
Thank you for that story, Daniel. And I think I'm going to wrap it up here now for episode 8. I'd like to thank everybody once again for tuning in. And please, if you like these stories, go to our Paranormal Planes podcast page there on Facebook. Share the page, share it with all your friends. And please get us more stories in, because we need stories in order to do these episodes. I'd like to thank Angela and Daniel for contributing to the podcast this time. And, hey, give a little shout out to my son Daniel there. Let him know how you think he did on the podcast reading the stories there. He'll enjoy the feedback, I think. Just leave a little something on either the episode or just put your own little thing up there on the Paranormal Planes podcast page and say, hey, thanks for the story, Daniel, and let him know how I did. But for right now, guys, I think I'm going to sign out, get this thing published and up for you. I know it's been a while, but I've had a lot of stuff going on lately. I had Dad in the hospital. He's 70 years old. He broke his femur and couldn't get around, and I still think he's probably struggling, because when you get older like that, it takes a while to get healthy again. Had to go up and help him in the clinic when he was in there, and help my stepmom out, and I don't know, try to do my part. So, I don't know, thanks for hanging in there with me, guys, and we'll keep the episodes rocking out, and hopefully you guys will keep the stories coming to me so we can continue to get these episodes out and get more guest appearances on here, hopefully. Still waiting excitedly here for a couple weeks. We're going to be in Colorado for our vacation. We'll be with the 970 paranormal group there. We're going to actually do an investigation, I believe. I hope time is on our side there. We're actually riding the Harley out there, so we're going to be kind of worn out, but I'm hoping to get in there like on a Saturday and do at least a part of the investigation with those guys, and hopefully some kind of live podcast with the 970 Paranormal group there while we're there doing the investigation, and get that up on the Paranormal Planes page here. So please like and share the page, tell all your friends, and keep the stories coming, guys, so we can keep relaying the stories to you. Thank you very much, and have a great evening. Later.